to the doctor, and holy crap, it's another tentacle growing out of my back. And I was like, I'm not even from Innsmouth.
Are you sure? I've seen the way you stare at people.
Well, you know. It's called the Innsmouth. Oh, yeah, good call.
Mm-hmm. You remember that one time we were talking about Innsmouth a few months ago? After you guys had went to the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. It was all Innsmouth themed.
That was so much fun.
And we were like, man, it'd be cool if they, like, did an Innsmouth expansion.
Right. And I kept fishing for it. Good thing we have the internet. You know?
Yeah.
Internet. Because I'm fishing for it. Yeah, that's all good.
That's, that was a joke.
They worshipped, so they said, the great old ones who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world at least.
Alright, welcome everyone to episode 12 of the Great Old Ones Gaming Podcast. Can you believe it? It's been a whole year, you guys.
Yay.
Woo! So, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Nate, lost in time and space, and joined with me today are my co-hosts.
I am the man from Ling, host of the Whisper in Darkness YouTube channel.
I'm Innkeeper Vase Odin from the Twisted Tentacle Inn.
Were you waiting for like a formal introduction there? Jeez, this is Nathan coming at you from Arkham Horror Images of Madness on Instagram and all the other things I'm not going to waste time with.
When you have 1 second of dead air, it makes people it shocks their system and it makes them pay more attention.
No, what they're doing is they're like, isn't Vase supposed to talk right now? This is pissing me off.
And then
we lost 13 more listeners.
No, they love it.
No, I usually just edit it all out.
Wah, wah.
But, yeah, it's been a while since we've last recorded an episode, you guys. How you guys doing?
Fantabulous. I actually got to play Arkham solo again for the first time in months.
What'd you play?
Is it Point of No Return? Is that the one that's the second scenario to the Wake one, 2A?
It's the third one.
It's either 2A or 2B.
That's Thousand Shapes.
Thousand Shapes, that's the one. That's the one with the unnameable.
Point of No Return is 3B.
Oh. So then that one, Thousand Shapes with the unnameable. And it was fun. Barely made it out alive.
Did you have any time to play anything else, or you just been working and?
No, so I have my Wednesday night D&D group, so that's been going on for years. So that happens every week. Rain, shine, coronavirus, doesn't matter. And yeah, I've just been working and doing a bunch of other stuff and other side projects. So everything's kind of taken a sidestep to other things.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah, but I was real happy to play. It felt so good to just get on the table again and just do some Arkham. So that was
yeah, we played a virtual game a couple of weeks ago. That was fun. Yeah,
and it was my first time playing virtual. Yeah, it was my first time playing the virtual. Second time. Well, first group, I guess, online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I consider that part of the same game.
Man, we got crushed in that game. That was brutal.
Oh yeah,
that was brutal.
It was close though. I think that game was super fun. That was one of the most fun games I've had. It was strategizing and just kind of working together. You know, it was Daisy and Tony Morgan.
Yep.
And
did you just say strategizing and working together? Isn't that Arkham Horror the card game? Help me out, Base.
Well, no, there's people that I've played with that kind of do their own thing. Kind of like Marvel Champions, you know. Some people play that way. But yeah, this was such a good game. I've never been so close to winning that scenario as that.
Yeah, neither have I. It's so difficult. I don't know what it is. It's either the -6 in the bag, or it's just like keeping the strength of the abyss down. That's so difficult.
Yeah.
Did I tell you what happened when I played that at Gen Con? I can't remember if I mentioned that on a previous episode, but I sat down with 3 other people, didn't know them. We played it it was a long time. It was like 3 or 4 hours. But Matt Newman came over. The Matt Newman. Okay. I don't know if anybody else has met him. I met him. All right. Anyway.
Wow, that was a weird flex.
So anyway, he came over. And he's just sitting there kind of bemused watching us. And I was like, what's going on? Like, are we doing something wrong? Several other people had already finished up. He goes, no, nobody else has done the ending that you're doing. And we're like, that could be bad or good. So, but he was like, yeah, I don't know. A lot of people don't do this part, but hey, anyway, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but it was just kind of funny to have him come over and be like, oh okay.
Yeah, because everyone else that does the ending in that scenario is the ending of death.
Yep.
I'm sure that's what he was getting at. So, Man from Lang, what have you been up to?
I've been really busy. I've been doing a lot of streaming with Nate and by myself, and been busy catching up. I'd bounced off the Sinking City earlier, so I've been replaying that for my Let's Play channel, and it's a weird game. It's I sort of had stopped right before the weirdness began, and there's a lot of strange characterization in it that kind of bothers me. And
what do you mean?
it's just the main character. He goes through. He's sort of like, there's one point where he's like lecturing one of the main NPCs about his relationship with the town, and it's kind of like, why are you doing this? Like, moments ago you were threatening to kill somebody in cold blood, and now you're being like you're talking about this guy's racism and trying to persuade him not to be a racist anymore. It's just very sort of jarring. And then I've gone through the part where you interact with the mob, which is kind of strange because it's a sort of wish it was more cultists and whatnot. And then you run into the Ku Klux Klan, and it's just like, this is very, very strange. But I'm enjoying it. I think I had to re-record it just because something happened to my previous game and it got deleted. But so I'm not too sure how much further I have to go, but I will continue until it is finished. I've also been playing the new Ori game, which is frustrating because I'm not really a platformer.
Yeah, those games can be punishing.
So I think the first time I'm still working through the first Ori game for the Let's Play channel, and I'm up to like 600 and some odd deaths. So who knows how many I'll rack up in the new one. But I saw there was a new sort of an open world, the King in Yellow RPG game. Video game that
sounds cool.
that I'm
video game?
thinking about trying, although it's just in open access and I'm not too sure. Apparently it has like dungeons you can wander into and whatnot, but
Really?
I haven't read much.
What's the
about
name
it.
of the game?
I think it's just the Yellow King or something like that, or I'd have to look it up on Steam, but it's yeah, it just came out in February.
Well, look at you being all up to date.
I know. I'm very cutting edge. It's just called The Yellow King. It's a dark horror MMO inspired by the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. Infinite dungeon exploration, boss raids, guilds, PvP, leaderboards, and the destruction of your soul.
Oh, so it's like a combat-heavy MMO type thing?
Well, I don't know. The graphics don't really... It sort of looks like Minecraft graphics.
Ooh, that's weird.
But yeah, I haven't given it a try yet. Probably because it's like $30 or something like that, and it's in early access, which means God only knows what you're gonna run into.
Yeah, it's got like a RuneScape, like original RuneScape vibe or something like that almost.
That'd be cool if they came out with like a Zork graphic game.
So we'll see. I may end up giving that a try when I finish the Sinking City, whenever that may be.
So is it heavily pixelated, like extremely, or is it more like a Stygian, like an 8-bit looking type?
No, I'd say it's more. I'm not sure what the name for the graphic style is, but it's fairly blocky.
Yeah, it's like a mixture of like cell shading plus blockiness. It's kind of hard to, it's hard to describe.
But it sort of looks, I'm just watching like them playing it, and it just looks like a lot of fighting, which sort of, so if you're looking for like an H.P. Lovecraft investigation game, I don't think this is it, because it just looks like they're killing a lot of skeletons.
Yeah, it's also kind of weird that it's called The Yellow King, and they're saying it's based on H.P. Lovecraft and not Chambers. But then it quotes.
No, they do mention that it's.
Oh yeah, look at that in the bottom there.
Elsewhere that they talk about that it's inspired by Robert W. Chambers as well. So that will be, that'll probably be one of the next games I take a look at. See how it goes. But yeah, I've been making my way through Return to the Dunwich Legacy with Ashcan Pete, and of course you and I, Nate, have been making our way through the Return to the Path to Carcosa. Unfortunately, we made a fairly significant error in our last game, so we're probably going to have to replay that, which is not replaying. I don't particularly like Echoes of the Past all that much, so having to replay it is.
No, it's not too bad in solo, but in multiplayer, it just feels like it drags on forever.
Yeah. So we'll see. We forgot to spawn one of the enemies, so that will change the scenario significantly. So we will replay that, and
yep.
Other than that, that's
yeah. And what about you, Nathan? What have you been up to?
Well, I work at a large game store, so recently we've been playing a game called Disinfect All the Surfaces and Practice Social Distancing, which hopefully won't have an expansion coming out. Other than that, game-wise, I've been playing a lot of Marvel Champions. I play that once or twice a week. I've been playing about 3 to 4 campaigns of Arkham Horror. That's been going swimmingly well. And by that I mean we've been dying and going insane. And then I've been prepping stuff for Kingdom Death Monster, Lord of the Rings, LCG, Marvel Champions, and Arkham, just to kind of bling out my stuff. And selling some board games, because I realize with the 4 games I just mentioned, I do not have enough time in the day to get everything done. So, all that and a bag of chips.
So I guess as far as me, I've just been so busy with real life stuff. My wife and I are about to close on a house in a couple of weeks. So
Nurse Heather?
Yep. Nurse Heather and I have been busy closing on a house that we'll be hopefully moving into at the beginning of next month. So that's been time consuming and stressful, but I have had a chance, like Man from Lang said. We've been slowly trucking our way through Return to Carcosa, and I'm going to be starting another campaign on our live stream, hopefully this coming Monday on the 16th, St. Paddy's Day. Seems fitting to play a rogue character on St. Paddy's Day. And I'll probably also try to promote Quarantine Con. I don't know if you guys have been on Discord or Facebook lately, but Brian Damon Sandberg.
Yep. The people from By the Same Token.
Yep.
Mentioned Quarantine.
It's a love child of, I guess, Brandon from Optimal Play and Brandon from Rite of Seeking. Is that his name? Brandon?
Brian David Sandberg.
Brian. Thank you. I was like, I knew it started with a B. So they're doing a bit of a a contest thing, I guess, on writeofseeking.com that you can check out. He's also doing a pretty cool little write-up thing. But basically what Quarantine Con is there's there's an event, and he wants various content creators of the Arkham LCG to run through Night of the Zealot, which is the core set campaign, with some extra ultimatums like wash your hands, which makes you include hypochondria in your base deck, and there's a couple other ones too that are pretty interesting. But so I might try to do that, but with Forgotten Age, and maybe add an extra ultimatum or two, just because that campaign needs more difficulty added to it. And other than that, we're slowly still trying to organize another session of Call of Cthulhu on our Discord server too. So if you're interested in playing Call of Cthulhu, you can head over to our Discord server and bother me about that. And what else? I think that's about it.
I'm interested in playing Call of Cthulhu.
Well, then join our Discord server.
Okay, I'll do that.
Hey, real quick, if you were to play half a session of Call of Cthulhu, would you go off all half-cocked?
I think you'd just be a call.
Call!
All right, so why don't we go ahead and dive into our first topic of the night here. Recently, Chaosium released the Cthulhu Dark Ages 3rd edition PDF, which is pretty interesting. It's a pretty well-beloved setting. It's set in 950/1050 AD in Anglo-Saxon Britain, which is a pretty cool time era. It's like Vikings and like ancient knights and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. But I wanted to kind of use it as a springboard to talk about time eras in general in Cthulhu Mythos gaming, and what are some of your favorite time eras, guys, and why do you like them so much?
Well, clearly the 1920s and 1930s are always interesting because a lot of the Mythos stories take place in that time period anyways. But I think like a lot of Mythos games tend to feel pulpy in that time period. It's hard to relate to it these days because we're so far removed from that period. So things like Prohibition and, that kind of thing, we just can't relate as well to it. So it comes across more like a comic book to me. I think the modern era is really awesome. I think Lovecraftian lore plays really well into the modern era. So things like Delta Green being one of my favorite role-playing games, it really adds more to the seriousness because you can relate to things, and then technology just adds an extra layer of complexity to the horrors, So I think the modern era is a really cool place to explore the mythos. What about yours?
I have played almost entirely 1920s, except for one con where we played during the Second World War, which was a lot of fun. But I tend to prefer the 1920s just because I feel that it's strange for us these days to go back to that era, and there was still an air of mystery about the world. So there's you can turn a lot of sort of everyday events into Cthulhu-inspired events without too much trouble.
I agree. The 1920s is a fitting time period because, of course, that's when H.P. Lovecraft said a lot of his stuff. But I've enjoyed, the Delta Green type modern day Lovecraftian stories, and I've enjoyed, reading about the different influences over the course of history. I kind of like it all. The one thing I would say, Vase had mentioned that the 1920s to him felt kind of comic booky and pulpy. But I think for me, when I play the traditional Lovecraftian games, Arkham games, is that's just another way to add that flavor, because you don't sit down and play most games with such a rich atmosphere. Like you don't sit down and play Catan or Cards Against Humanity or whatever, and in addition to the game, have all of that, like, just thick, the music, the time period, the way they talked, the way they dressed, what was going on in that time period. It just adds so much to the game. It's hard to parse it out and to kind of separate that from what we're all familiar with. But I do like when people are creative and come up with different time periods. It would be neat to try some like medieval Cthulhu stuff and ancient.
That would be
times.
pretty cool.
Yeah,
But not in the D&D way where like people are throwing spells at a elder thing or, hacking Cthulhu's tentacles or whatever. with
well,
a
I did
sword.
say medieval and not fantastic.
No, I know. That's why I'm differentiating it. So like actual medieval versus a D&D type thing.
Because back in the day, they had the plow and they had the Black Plague and they had machetes.
They had machete, and they were really highly superstitious people too back then. And I think in just about every culture, there was so much superstition and things that something really strange and really out there, like a
Like
Lovecraftian,
Flat Earth.
exactly, like flat Earth, like flat Earth is today. Yep, exactly, because it's real.
Well, yeah, and just even like the changes, like you said, Vase, like going from a fantasy setting versus like actual medieval. There's, I think in D&D it suffers a lot from like just kind of magic being this like catch-all, fix-all problem. Like, oh, I can just cast like Sphere of Light over there and I can see now. Whereas when you're playing a Call of Cthulhu game set in medieval periods, like you have to really consider like torchlight only goes so far, and whatever you're trying to investigate, you're probably going to do during the day when you can actually see. So like little things like that like make the game much more different than say playing in 1920s or modern day where you have so much more technology at the ready and for your access. Like traveling is also another thing that's a huge difference between all those settings too. And I find it interesting, Vase, that you find the 1920s, 1930s time era to be pulpy in a sense, because that's really like the genesis of that genre is from those types of stories. So
Yeah. I mean, it's fitting. I'm not saying it's pulpy in a bad way. Like, I enjoy it for what it is, and I'm a big Lovecraft fan and definitely an Arkham Horror the card game fan. So I love that stuff, and it has its place. But I also enjoy the really horrific, like actually scares you type of horror. And for me, what does that is a modern era one, because I think just being able to relate to it more is what really strikes fear in someone, So when I played Delta Green with my D&D group, I could see their faces, and like some of them get shivers, and I could see goosebumps on their arms when we play Delta Green. Like it's that, like they actually can feel things happening, So something like that, I don't think I can get that kind of reaction from playing, say, Call of Cthulhu with them, because they feel a little more heroic, like they can shotgun something to death, whereas in Delta Green, you don't have that capability. At least not to the extent.
It could be like a difference of systems too, like game systems, but yeah, I think by and large, like you're definitely right about that comparison. And Man from Lang, you kind of feel the opposite way, whereas you feel like stepping back into the 1920s makes you feel like there's a sense of mystery in the world, which is also true and interesting.
Yeah, the only other era I've sort of been tempted to run a Call of Cthulhu game in would be the Wild West, but that's largely because I grew up sort of my father was a big fan of Westerns, and so I ended up watching a lot of Westerns as a child, and we had a book series that had a lot of pictures of the Old West, so I could really, if I could find those books again, they'd be a fantastic resource for creating a campaign in that era and being able to have like one of the big things about Call of Cthulhu is having the props and whatnot. So being able to have pictures of gunslingers or just people and whatnot would be great for immersion. And I know that Chaosium there is a Wild West setting that is available. I haven't checked it out, but that would be the one that I would be interested in. Again, just because it's there's enough. There's still a lot of mystery in the world, and so you can have sort of everyday, ordinary events can take on horrific proportions with just a little bit of a twist. Where I feel with something like a modern campaign, you'd have to work a little harder as a game master because you can just, things like cell phones and whatnot make it so much easier to communicate and understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are definitely hurdles that you have to get over as a game master running modern era games like that. Nathan, if you had to pick one setting outside of the 1920s to play a Mythos-inspired game, what would you pick?
I would like to. I've seen a lot of modern day stuff, and I've played and dealt with a lot of the era stuff. So I would like to try something like medieval or ancient, because, like Vase said, it would deal with superstitions and what have you. But it would be interesting to see in what ways the mythos bled itself into the budding cultures, or dark times.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way too. And there's a lot of like ancient religions and like poly and monotheistic things that are going on that are not even probably in recorded history too. So that's a lot. There's a lot of inspiration you could take to develop a mythos game in that time era. For me personally, I like the medieval period, and I also like the Victorian Gaslight period, and like going into like 1890s Britain.
Yeah,
like with a lot of stuff that Lovecraft was inspired by, or like even delving into stuff like Robert W. Chambers, because that gives
more Gothic time period.
Yeah, it gives you access to things like Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes and Jack the Ripper.
And what was that? What's the RPG for that time period? Is it called Gaslight?
Yeah, yep, Cthulhu Gaslight. Yep. So there's a lot of cool settings that you could potentially develop a Mythos game for.
No one mentioned space or future, and there are a lot of stories like Lovecraft had a couple of stories that dealt with like futuristic space travel in the Walls of Syrinx, and I know there's a couple as well. And what's his name? Smith.
Clark Ashton Smith.
Clark Ashton Smith has a ton of stories that deal with that, with like space travel and more futuristic Lovecraftian mythos stuff. And I don't know that are there any games that are like a cyberpunk but mythos, or even more more like space travel but mythos related?
There is there's Cthulhu Icarus, which really gives me really reminds me of Aliens. It's basically like it's set on a space station, like outside of the orbit of the moon, I believe. And you're sent there to like investigate the last known survivors of the space station. But I think other than that, there's the only other future setting that they really have is like a post-apocalyptic setting where the great old ones have conquered the earth and the last known humans are like, just struggling to survive.
Cthulhu City. Is that what it's called? That one? Is it I think it's a Call of Cthulhu. Or no, it's a Gumshoe.
That's Trail of Cthulhu.
Trail of Cthulhu,
yeah.
Gumshoe.
Yeah.
There's also Mothership, which is a sci-fi horror RPG.
It's been doing really well for sales and won an Emmy, I think, this last year.
Really?
Oh, wow, really?
Which it wouldn't take too much to... I'm not sure what kind of horror it is. I'm not... I just know the name, but it wouldn't take very much to incorporate mythos-related horror in that sort of game.
Yeah, definitely. There is there's
out.
also a couple space missions for Delta Green too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there are. But they're not futuristic. They're more like NASA, type thing. Which they're really cool how they were done, but yeah, it's not quite like a futuristic that I know of. I haven't seen any that are like that.
Yeah, but there's so much source material you could draw from to do a futuristic Lovecraft campaign.
Yeah, that's true, and you can mix genres too, and it's really interesting. Man from Lang mentioned the Wild West, and I hadn't even considered the Wild West for Lovecraftian stuff, but it reminded me when you were talking about it Have you guys seen a movie called Bone Tomahawk?
No.
Well, just a brief thing. It's like a Western horror film. It's not Lovecraftian at all, but it very well could have been with just a few minor tweaks. And I think something like that would really lend itself well to like Mythos related stuff. So I recommend you watch that movie. It's very like brutal and creepy. It's really good.
During the winter of 1927/28, officials of the federal government made a strange and secret investigation of certain conditions in the ancient Massachusetts seaport of Innsmouth. The public first learned of it in February, when a vast series of raids and arrests occurred, followed by the deliberate burning and dynamiting, under suitable precautions, of an enormous number of crumbling, worm-eaten, and supposedly empty houses along the abandoned waterfront. Uninquiring souls let this occurrence pass as one of the major clashes in a spasmodic war on liquor. Keener news followers, however, wondered at the prestigious number of arrests, the abnormally large force of men used in making them, and the secrecy surrounding the disposal of the prisoners. No trials or even definite charges were reported, nor were any captives seen thereafter in the regular gravels of the nation. There were vague statements about disease and concentration camps, and later dispersal in various naval and military prisons, but nothing positive ever developed. Innsmouth itself was left almost depopulated, and is even now only beginning to show signs of a sluggishly revived existence. So in recent live streams, FFG revealed that Arkham Horror 3rd Edition and the Arkham LCG will both be traveling to Innsmouth. So I thought we could spend some time and discuss Innsmouth as a location, the lore behind it, the people that live in Innsmouth, and what sorts of types of enemies we could expect to see going into a campaign for Innsmouth. What are some things that you guys like most about going to Innsmouth?
I think Innsmouth is so different because we haven't had anything that's like very like coastal or port type town locations. So I think it'll be really cool to see how they do. Well, I guess we had Carnivale. I guess that's kind of pretty similar in terms of like the setting, but I like the creepiness of the people just having features, like fish-like features, but they're not fully horrific. It's just like something's really odd about that person. Their eyes are a little too big, or it seems like they have gills. So those kind of things. They smell weird. Yeah, all those little things, or they have weird things little sounds they make, or whatever, that just give hints that something isn't right. And it's just about everybody who lives in Innsmouth. So when you're there, it's like there's just this ominous feeling of dread, Mm-hmm. So that I think Innsmouth is a really cool location, and knowing the Arkham people, I think they're going to do a really good job with it.
The Arkham people. I wonder if there's blowguns used. So I forgot one obvious thing. We're going to get Silas's trident finally. I've been waiting for that puppet.
His trident? What?
No, the fact that we got his alternate cards in the novella. Now we get to get his trident with his actual character. I'm kind of excited about that. I want to spear some people with the trident.
I believe it's a harpoon.
Is it a harpoon?
I believe it's a harpoon.
So you're talking about a trident. It's completely different.
It will now be a trident.
You're thinking Aquaman, I think.
No, he's from undersea. He's got a redheaded girlfriend. He's from a lighthouse.
Oh, you're right. That's Silas.
Oh, shit. You're right. You're right.
For those who don't know about Silas Marsh, he was a bonus investigator that you could get when you buy the novella for Silas Marsh. What's the novella called again?
The Deep Gate, I think? Yeah.
Deep Gate. So whoever bought the Deep Gate got the Silas Marsh investigator with some alternate signature cards. So his actual investigator card shows what his actual signature card names are. So everyone's kind of been wondering what they're actually going to be like. And Innsmouth is a perfect place for Silas Marsh to be released.
Oh, definitely. And like we've said in previous episodes too, it seems like they've been hinting that we'll be going to Innsmouth for a while now with Tony's weakness. The Quarry is a deep one enemy. And they touched on the Silver Twilight Lodge, so it was only a matter of time before they dug into the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
Not to mention the core set has some encounter cards that we haven't ever used that all are kind of touch on Cthulhu and deep ones.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. But we can definitely expect to see the Esoteric Order of Dagon, and they worship the Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, and to an extent Cthulhu. So we're definitely going to see Dagon, right? Or are we definitely going to see Cthulhu? Do we think it's time for Cthulhu?
I think they're going to showcase Dagon because you can't really insert Dagon into other arcs or campaigns as easily, whereas Cthulhu could be at the Mountains of Madness, or they could do another nautical one, or because he can kind of get around. I don't know.
Well, also
it might be both.
Also, it could be both. Yeah, I was thinking what you just said because the current cycle, spoiler alert. Hey, we said a spoiler alert before we spoiled it. So the Dream Eater cycle has Atlatnacha.
Bless you.
Oh, thank you. It does have a lot of Nyarlathotep in there too. So we kind of got both in a way. So maybe they'll do the same thing in that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's possible. Like maybe like Cthulhu is like working with Dagon or something weird like that.
Yeah, like not necessarily fighting Cthulhu, but like we could feel his presence in one way or another, like through encounter cards that have to do with his, dream effects and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect they might save Cthulhu for like a relay themed, like a global spanning campaign where you end up in relay, as opposed to, because I think you could do some interesting things with the locations in a place like that. Whereas I think Innsmouth, the thing I like about Innsmouth is where Arkham and to a lesser extent Dunwich are sort of friendly towns to investigators. Innsmouth is definitely not. And so the stories have, the protagonist is basically alone against the entire town.
Yeah, very good point.
And the town being run by the Marsh family, so I assume we'll see a lot of the Marsh family play a role and Devil's Reef and whatnot. But I think they could really evoke a lot of creepiness by basically pitting you, like a lot of the locations being unfriendly and very overwhelming odds when you're in the town, as opposed to a place like Arkham where people are a lot friendlier.
Yeah, definitely. You could eat there could be like a whole scenario just based in the Gilman house, for instance, where you're like just trying to survive the night and people are like trying to get into your room, like part of the story.
Yeah, they did something like that for, I don't know if you've played Mansions of Madness, but I think it's in the main box, the big box, the first one. There is a scenario set in Innsmouth, which is very similar to how the story unfolds, where you're in a hotel and then there are mobs roaming around outside. So you could, I'm sure we'll see something like that where you may need to escape large groups of deep one hybrids and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that we could potentially see too as maybe a story asset is the weird iridescent crown thing that's in the historical museum that the guy goes to in the beginning of the story.
Yeah. But Innsmouth is also about sort of degenerate families as well. So perhaps there's some sort of, they'd be able to work in that sort of angle where the investigator is the investigator's past is involved. Certainly, I mean, with somebody like Silas, that's easily enough to do because he is a marsh after all.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps they can work that in, regardless of the investigator that you're playing. That maybe maybe as part of the campaign, you slowly come to the realization that you're part deep one, and that the weaknesses that you're adding to your deck are play into that.
That would be cool.
I'd love to see that. Yeah, like some mutations or at least
kind of like the Curse of the Rougarou, but spanned out over a course of a campaign.
Yeah, something like that. Where in the Curse of the Rougarou, you get cursed. I mean, you can have the curse in your deck at the end, but this would be more sort of a slow. You'd be just adding stuff slowly over the course of the campaign, and I mean, maybe the campaign you win if you don't succumb to the temptation to flee to the sea or something like that, as opposed to
that's cool. And then it just kind of scales over time.
Yeah, as opposed to like beat up. Like it seems like a lot of the campaigns that we've had where it's just like, okay, now is your showdown with Hastur, now is your showdown with Nyarlathotep, now is your showdown with Atlach-Nacha, whereas this could be less of a showdown against an enemy and a showdown with yourself to see whether you actually shake off that Innsmouth curse or not. Make it more personal rather than sort of more like what they did with Path to Carcosa, where it was the conviction and doubt.
at some point also they would have to go to Arkham, because I think Matt Newman said on multiple interviews that since it's called Arkham Horror, they wanted to include the locations of Arkham at least at some point in most campaigns. And I mean, although in the standalones they don't really do that, but in all the campaigns at some point we've gotten back to Arkham. But I wonder if in this one they're going to start in Arkham, maybe in the initial deluxe expansion, and then transition into Innsmouth for the remainder of the campaign.
It's possible. It's also possible that we could even go to Kingsport too, and you could like start in Kingsport and then go from there. In the live stream for the 3rd edition board game, they had mentioned that there will be scenarios from both Innsmouth and Kingsport in the 3rd edition board game, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Kingsport make an appearance either.
Yeah, but for me, Kingsport has always been more closely related to the Dreamlands than... Like, I would have expected us to go to Kingsport as part of the Dream Eaters campaign, not the Innsmouth conspiracy. I agree with Vase. I think we'll probably start in Arkham and then make your way to... Perhaps there's some sort of the beginning would be like some sort of family relations or whatnot, and you're investigating that, and then that leads you to Innsmouth, where you realize the horror of your family.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I guess we won't know until the set's officially released. But as far as investigators or potential player cards that we could see, do you guys have any speculations about stuff like that?
Well, I think they've been hinting that Kate Winthrop is going to be coming sooner than later. Silas seems like a pretty clear lock for the survivor slot. Or maybe they'll do what they did with Circle Undone and have 2 survivors. That could certainly be a possibility as well. And throw in Silas as a bonus.
What about Norman? Maybe have 2 seekers?
Yeah, Norman. I thought Norman would have been coming out in the Circle Undone just because he's the mathematician and related to space, which would work with,
I think he'd be for like a slightly more cosmic one, maybe.
Yeah.
That would be one that we could incorporate Cthulhu and be like, the stars and blah, 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 they indicate this location off the coast has activity. I don't know. It doesn't seem like he would fit.
I don't have a guardian in mind that would sort of easily fit into into Innsmouth, but
Maybe some kind of a cook who's good at fish frying.
Well, they already have Zoe.
What about the spy? I don't know that she'd be guarding necessarily, but
no, I suspect she'd be a rogue. Trish Scarbarough.
Trish Scarbarough, yeah.
I mean, they could also, if they go the family angle. I mean, there's a lot of sort of those old money characters who you could have. Like, there's the butler. Is it Carson? Is the butler?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, they've got like, I don't mean Charlie Kane maybe, but
Charlie Kane seems weird, a weird choice, but although he's a fan favorite.
I want him soon.
yeah, it's hard to say because the setting doesn't really lend itself to sort of to many of the characters that we have left. Besides, I mean, Silas is the obvious one, but then after that, it feels pretty wide open as to what they. But then, I mean, when they released Dream Eaters, I mean, if you had asked me then, like, which investigators were going to be in that box, I would never have said Tony Morgan.
That's a good point. I thought that would be a Innsmouth one for sure.
So who knows, right? It's like I would not have said Tom. I would have said Luke Robinson for sure. But then after that, I wouldn't have chosen, I don't think, any of the investigators that we got.
You bring up a really good point. I don't think that the investigators always fully correlate with the setting or with the campaign setting because, yeah, I mean, otherwise we would have had Hamburger Jack, or what's his name? Jack something?
Hamburger Jack.
In the Forgotten Age. Like, and he's even mentioned in it, so...
You mean Monterey?
Monterey Jack.
Now called Hamburger Jack. I still think that it would have been amazing if halfway through that campaign you stumble across him like he's in a pack, and then you can like just have him at that point. But how cool is that for an intro? Like where you rescue him or he saves you, and you're like, boom, investigator. What? That would have been
cool.
awesome.
I wish there would have something like that. Yeah.
Hamburger Jack, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think in hindsight they might have considered adding both Ursula and Monterey Jack in that expansion if they did it over again, like they did with Circle Undone, adding Marie and Diana.
But he also would be a really good, like when they do another, not necessarily jungle because they've already done that, but another expedition. I mean, he would be a natural.
I mean, Egypt is pretty rich.
Yep.
There's a lot you could do with
true.
Egypt. Or maybe the globe spanning, if they wanted to do like a globe spanning relay thing.
Or Masks of Nyarlathotep have globe spanning.
You could see him. You could see him in
He
that.
also could be in mountains. Yeah, I guess that's true. But what about the traveling salesman? He could be anywhere because he travels, right?
Yeah, actually, he would make a pretty good Innsmouth investigator. Jenkins.
Yeah, Bob Jenkins.
Leroy. Oh, Bob Jenkins.
I could definitely see him in an Innsmouth expansion.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Jacqueline too. So she can being a psychic, she can see into your past. She can see that potentially maybe you're a deep one.
That's really good, actually.
She could be a mystic.
I think it was you, Nate, who had mentioned that the Barkham Horror investigators or the Barkham Horror dogs may have their investigator counterparts coming up sooner than later.
Yeah.
I think Jacqueline is one of those. I think Agatha is another one.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right.
Oh.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see those investigators make an appearance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they did that with Tommy, so it's possible. Let's see. As far as other investigators, though, they did also recently reveal for the Arkham 3rd Edition Stella Clark, the letter carrier. Not that we're active players of Arkham 3rd Edition, but it is an interesting topic to bring into the LCG too. She is a primary survivor class investigator, so So there's potential for her to have shenanigans with like discarding cards or movement like Rita does. Her front abilities both involve movement, and she has a decent willpower. So I'm not really sure how much we can really speculate about Stella, but there is a potential that Stella could also be in the set too.
But it's really good news that we got a new investigator announced, because that means that they are working on creating new ones. I've had a fear that we're going to run out of investigators at some point, and once this Innsmouth expansion comes out, we're down to like maybe 3 expansions away from running out. So it's good that they are working on getting new investigators, and this one is kind of interesting because she's the first trans investigator in Arkham Horror, the card game.
What's the name of the lawyer? Barnabas?
I have the list pulled up right here. I can find out in just
There's a lawyer.
George Barnaby.
George Barnaby. Yeah. He might be a possibility.
Yep.
We're doing really well with names in this episode.
It's funny you mentioned that too, Man from Lane, because he actually, when he appeared in 2nd edition, he appeared in the Innsmouth Horror.
That's right.
So
yeah.
The other investigators that appeared in that box were Finn, Akachi, Agnes, Vincent, Trish, Yorick, Zoe, and Harvey Walters are the other ones. So we've already seen most of these. We've seen Zoe, we've seen Yorick, we've seen Agnes and Akachi, and Finn. So yep, George and Hank are possibilities as well.
Yeah. It's really hard to say, just because who would have picked Akachi to be in the Path to Carcosa? Certainly not me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I probably wouldn't have either initially.
They can pretty much throw anybody in there and justify it. So, and apparently, they've probably made investigators for all of the characters. It's just a matter of when we see them. It probably won't be Dexter, since he's coming out in the book, and I believe it's next month he'll be released. So,
is it really next month? I thought they'd wait until May.
Yeah, well, they've got a lot of products come. They've got the Innsmouth Conspiracy. They've got this new product that they're going to be announcing on, is it Thursday?
The 19th, I think. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So there's that product. They've got Arkham Horror. They've got Return to the Forgotten Age. They've got a pretty heavy release schedule here in the next couple months, which is good and bad if you're a content creator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh man, I just realized I had pre-ordered Arkham Horror from my local game store that closed. So there goes that. I'm gonna have to reorder it. Darn.
Well, good thing you'll have the chance to do that.
I was about to say, I also know a store.
Well, hopefully they're not sold out. I'm gonna have to search that.
I'm personally very excited to punch deep ones.
That's always fun.
So I wanted to give people plenty of time as a heads up this year. Last time I kind of sprung it on people with a couple months to go, and then I got all the wheels turning pretty quickly. This year we'll give people a lot longer to prep. We are looking at doing Arkham Horror Beneath the Waves Session 2, 2020 version. And I believe I'm looking at October 24th and 25th. So 2 days instead of 1 day. And as soon as I get everything fully turning, it's going to be pretty massive, because I reach out to a lot of content creators, and I try to get a lot of fun things in line, and it's a lot of work. So I've kind of been slow rolling that since I decided I would do it and on the dates. But, I'll be getting together with the people here in the podcast and talking about ideas. I'll be getting together with Vase, who's local, so that we can start planning that. But I've already reached out to Cole Monroe Chitty, who did the artwork for the first one and also did some art for Man from Lang. about getting a new sign that I'll post up and make it official on Facebook. So anyway, that's going to be coming up towards the end of October. So if anyone's in the is going to be in Portland or wants to come visit for this event, it'll be 2 days of just pure Arkham horror fun, and we try to make it a festive, memorable experience.
Yeah, last year was a blast. So if you have the chance to make it out, what was it, October 23rd and 24th?
I thought it was 24th, 25th, but I'll double check.
You're probably right.
Yep, 24th, 25th of October, and that's a Saturday, Sunday.
So yeah, we'll have more details as the date gets closer, but for now, stay tuned.
So, as people have seen on my Instagram, Arkham Horror Images of Madness, I do like to bling out my game when I can. In the past, I've said one of the quickest ways to do so is just getting little hobby trees. For most hobby stores, it'll be from like train shops and that kind of diorama. But another thing that you can do, you can get custom pathways. There are some great pathways from, by the same token, of course, always has good stuff in acrylic. Miles, is it Arbeck? I keep on remembering the name of his company is R-Bits, but his actual name is like Arbeck, I believe. He's got some cool fiberglass / metal movement things, but my original set was like a garden pathway type cobblestone type thing. Anyway, having custom pathways is cool. I have little benches, statues. I've got some gravestones, which I use especially for like the midnight masks, because they talk about going to the graveyard. A few houses. You don't have to make it ridiculous like I do, but crates are a good thing to put on the side of locations. Basically, it's however much you want to sink into it. But, people are like, how long does it take you to set up your stuff? It takes about 10 minutes, because you just, boom, put out your trees, put out the paths, put out a few things here and there. I've got some lights from, I think, Department 56 is where I got them online. And, they're $20, but you put in the battery and light those puppies up, and you bring a whole new level to your setup. So just as a heads up, if anybody does want to know more about how to accessorize and develop more of a atmospheric setup, you can ask us on our Discord. You could also email me directly, jadeforest4 at gmail.com. Or you could just ask questions on various Instagram pictures or on the Instagram channel. Switching topics from something that most people don't do. Sorry, Nate, what was that?
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. I just had a little bit of a... You're good.
Just a little bit of a... Anyway, switching topics away from my glorified and obviously over-the-top setups. I was going to cover In the Mansion of Madness, which is a book by Mark Teppo. He is a Portlandian gentleman who is awesome. He came in one day and said, "Hey, I have this book that I wrote." And I'm like, "What? What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's a book based on kind of the Cthulhu mythos, and it's got a strong flavor of Delta Green, but it's the Night Office series that he's doing. He's already said he's working on another book, and I tell you, I read it a few times because it's a choose-your-own-adventure set pretty much in modern times here, and I was like, I'm not going to recommend this to people or do any type of a giveaway until I test it out. And it's been a lot of fun. There are roughly, I believe, 60 ways to die, 5 ways to win. And you start off and you open it up and it says it's the Asset Resource Management PAE-138-B for internal use only. So it's very much like a field manual on what people in modern day would have to do if they worked for some kind of like basically like Delta Green. It's written in a very candid way. There's F-bombs. There's all kinds of things like, what the hell, screw this. It just feels very natural. It feels very modern. And like, I've done like 4 or 5 variations on the main path to go through the book. And every time I do so, I'm like, holy crap, he thought of all this. And now there's this new area to explore that I wouldn't have even thought to look for. But I was going to read a very quick excerpt from the book as you were doing it here, just to give you all an idea. So you show up as part of a team. There's, I believe, an opener and a closer, and then another job that people have. So there's usually 3 people that go investigate a location. It starts off like this. You're late, Pearson says. He's waiting for you on the dark porch of the Zelford estate. It's a cloudy night, and the light from the street slashes through the stark branches of the trees in the estate grounds, leaving pale marks across the front of the foreboding mansion. Pearson gets the fidgets. You can tell by the acrid cigarette haze enveloping him. He hand-rolls them, using some noxious foreign tobacco. Makes you think of old tires and autopsies, etc., etc. So, I mean, obviously the flavors there, the choose your own adventure aspect is very well done. It's not meant for kids, obviously. There's several comments that are just like, whoa. But it's very funny at times. But more to the point, it's a fun read. And I'm very grateful he popped in, because being able to share this with my store customers, being able to share this with you that are listening, and of course, giving away a copy seems like the next best step. So for anybody that's interested in getting a free copy of In the Mansion of Madness by Mark Teppo, you can simply write to Carolynfernthebotanist, where we have our dedicated legion of, I think it's 1,000 some volunteers.
Yeah, Carolyn Fern, the botanist, not Carol Fern.
That's what I
You
said.
said Carol Fern.
Oh.
There's a theme in this episode of ruining names
as
for everything, apparently. Carolyn Fern, the botanist.
So if you just write to Betty Crocker, the cook, Carolynfernthebotanist at gmail.com. And we have a lot of people that monitor that email address, that let us know the moment we get something, and they track us down. If we're on vacation, they hand deliver a note. If we're sleeping, they send somebody to wake us up. I mean, it's a very cutting edge process.
I've gotten a notice from them like seconds before an email comes in. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing.
Multiple Shuggoths are involved.
The Minority Report Division, yeah.
But speaking of Carolyn Fern, the botanist, we did a contest on our last episode, and Vase, we have a winner, do we not?
We most certainly do have a winner. And let me go back to the Carolyn Fern, the Botanist Society email. And
did you say Carolynfernthebotanist at gmail.com?
At gmail.com, yep.
But for those who don't remember, we had asked listeners of the show to come up with their own custom investigator and signature cards. It was a question posed to us by patron of the show, UC. So, Vase, if you're ready here.
Well, before I announce the winner, I'm gonna give a honorable mention to David, who submitted an investigator called Juan Piedra. It's a little stone, is a piedra. Rogue, and he's a bank auditor. 6 health, 8 sanity, and he basically he's a rogue whose stats lend him more towards clooving versus Tony Morgan, who's more like a fighty rogue. So this guy is like a corrupt bank auditor, since he's a rogue. And once per round, when he discovers a clue, he gains 1 resource, similar to like Milan, the taboo version of Milan. Only it's not restricted to investigative checks. You can gain a clue using a card that gets you a clue for free, and you'll still gain a resource. And the Elder Sign is a +1. You spend 2 resources to discover a clue at your location. His signature card is Natural Analysis, and it's a skill card with 2 intellect pips. As an additional cost, spend up to 3 resources. If you succeed by one or more, gain twice that many resources. Kind of like Watch This. And the weakness is Crippling Doubt. Revelation put into play into your threat area. You cannot discover clues, which is extremely brutal. Didn't really submit a backstory or any kind of flavor information for him. So that's why Andrew is the winner, because he did go above and beyond with that. Basically, Andrew submitted an investigator, and he gave a tremendous amount of like lore and backstory for him. And that investigator is Art Kinney. He is, I'm assuming, Irish, because he gives me this entire backstory on, I guess they're called, where is this? Navvies, the Navvy. They're basically people back in England who worked on like railroads. They were like drifters and kind of labor workers type of stuff. And this guy's kind of a tough guy. He's one of those drifter workers. So in a way, he's kind of like Ashcan Pete, but he's more of a loner. So he doesn't have a dog. And he basically works on his emotional baggage by getting into fist fights. So he's very fighty as well. So he has a really high combat of 5. And I'll read some of his cards. So his investigator card, he's Art Kinney, the laborer. 2 willpower, 2 intellect, and 5 combat, 3 evade. Drifter trait, and it's a reaction when you use a fight action on a card. If the card you're using does not offer a combat bonus, it gets a +2 to combat. So all those cards that do bonus damage but don't give you a combat bonus now work really well in Art Kinney. His Elder Sign effect is a +0, but heal 1 damage or 1 horror. And now that we reveal his Elder Sign effect, his main kind of theme mechanically is that he uses damage and horror kind of as a resource. So he has access to a lot of cards where you can take other people's damage or other people's horror, or you can use damage or horror to do certain things. So his deck building requirements are deck size of 30, survivor cards level 0 to 5. He's a survivor. Neutral cards 0 to 5, up to 5 spirit cards level 0 to 2, and up to 5 melee cards level 0. The other thing is the theme for this investigator, he's not like a firearms type of user. He's more like a hand-to-hand combat. So he wants to use a lot of like the machete and the meat cleaver, that kind of stuff. And his signature cards, he has 2 signature cards and 1 signature weakness. The weakness is a treachery, lost innocence, flaw. When it's revealed, you take 1 horror, discard any cards that heal horror or heal damage from your hand or play area, which is brutal for this guy. And if you have less than 20 cards in your discard pile, you shuffle this card back into your deck. And he has 2 signature cards. One is an asset, 2-cost asset that doesn't take up any slots. It's called a History of Violence. 2 combat pips, fast. It's a talent and melee traded. Fight action. After a successful fight action with a melee card, exhaust a History of Violence and take 1 damage to deal 1 additional damage to that enemy. And this asset also has 2 damage threshold, so you can use it to tank a little bit. So what this does is those 3 health enemies, it makes them a lot easier to kill. If you're chopping with the machete, you do 2 damage, and then you can do an additional damage and kill a 3 health enemy with this card in play. The other signature card is Repressed Memories. It's a 2-cost asset with 2 willpower icons with talent trait. Reaction when you investigate, exhaust repressed memories and take 1 horror. Your location gets -2 shroud for this investigation. Or you can use a different reaction after you discover a clue, exhaust repressed memories, take 1 horror and discover an additional clue. And it has a 2 horror threshold. So very cool, very interesting mechanics, very interesting backstory. The mechanics work really well with the backstory and the lore and the theme of this character. I really enjoyed reading this guy, and it seems like a really solid investigator to play with. I don't know how balanced it would be. And, Andrew also states that he hasn't actually had a chance to test play him, but I'd be interested in hearing how this guy does in scenarios and how these mechanics work along with him. So Andrew's our winner. And good job. This was an amazing, amazing investigator. We'll post it up on the website, on the show notes, all the information about him. He did make custom card images for him as well, so we can probably post those up as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so congratulations to you, Andrew, for rising up to the occasion. So if you could just go ahead and send an email to the Society of Carolynfernthebotanist at gmail.com with your shipping information, we will be sure to get your art print out to you.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him and tell him he won as well.
Nice. Very cool.
I mean, our crew that manages the email address will reach out to him.
Yeah, I was about to say, don't give it away. We need to make sure we look professional.
Our people will talk to your people.
I don't know if people follow what I was doing on the Arkham Horror, the card game, Facebook post, but I also did make a fan-made investigator on that as well. And I had several people respond to that, which was fantastic. Matter of fact, I had somebody local win. I think he submitted 3 or 4 different investigators, all pretty well thought out. And someone goes, hey, what about this? And on the fly, he just made one for somebody who asked. So it was just like ridiculous. And that was Michael Hawkins. But I wanted to touch on this because we have somebody who did a lot of cool stuff. It was Jesse Pekka who did the Pennywise one.
Mm-hmm.
He made that character. He submitted that character to mine. And then he's also been doing some run-throughs, I believe, of Dunwich on, what do you call it? He's been linking it up on the Facebook group, too. But, I mean, that's just taking your idea and really running with it. So I just want to give a shout-out to that as well. In addition, of course, congratulating Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so big shout-out again to Andrew and to UC for winning and submitting the question respectively.
Yeah. It was fun. Did you guys get to work on a custom investigator at all?
I mean, I did a custom Kate a long time ago.
I recall,
I didn't want to do another one.
The rule was no existing investigators.
Yeah. So
So you screwed up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I almost want to make one for Vase. I think that would be fun to like fashion.
He'd be too much of a
I have to make
badass,
one
though.
for him, and then
Like he would just win.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that might be his weakness.
Hubris.
I'm a badass. That just shows him like doing 2 thumbs at himself. That would be fun to play at Beneath the Waves. My custom Vase investigator.
We should each.
I'll think about
You know what we should do? We should each make a custom investigator for one of the other people on the Great Old Ones. So.
Oh, jeez.
You could do one for me. I could do one for Nate. Nate could do Man from Lang. Man from Lang can do Nathan. And then we'll play them at Beneath the Waves.
Oh, God.
Custom team with the Great Old Ones.
Not be balanced at all. All right, I'm going to make Man from Lang's really good if that's the case. 5 intellect, 5 combat, no weakness. There we
5
go.
evade and 5 everything.
Yep. No Elder Sign ability, though. That's balanced.
12 health, 15 sanity. Who said the cap was 9?
Yeah, right?
Well, also I was thinking about to really get a sense of how these deities are compared to humans, because people are like, oh yeah, in D&D I'll go fight a dragon, and then people play Call of Cthulhu and they're like, oh, if I ran up against Cthulhu, I'd just go fight him. So I think it'd be fun to show a stat line that shows like, okay, well in Arkham, this person has a 5 fight. That's pretty good, right? Cthulhu has a 3,200 and there's no auto fail. So good luck with that.
Before we kick things off into trivia time, I did quickly want to give a special shout out to the esoteric order of our patrons, and a random shout out this episode to a one Pontus Peterson. So Pontus, thank you very much for your support. The first episode of our ongoing Call of Cthulhu campaign, Flotsam and Jetsam, is actually now available as of the recording of this episode for our patrons. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out there. As always, if you want to support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/thegreatoldOnesgaming, and you can pick a tier and get rewards. It's pretty cool.
Thank you, patrons. We really appreciate you guys.
All right, cue the music. Okay, is everybody ready? Should we get a sound off? I secretly am hoping for a certain person to win today, but I'm not going to say who. But, all right. So I have 10 questions to ask, and I basically have these sorted into various piles. One pile goes off the picture, one